So all behaviors occur within an environmental context, and behavior cannot be emitted in an environmental void or vacuum. So we've talked about a behavior is, anything that we can do that's interacting within our environmental context. And so that means that behavior can't just happen in a void or a vacuum. So we need the environmental context, and that leads us to think about, okay, what in the environmental context is affecting us, affecting how we behave, things like that. So for this example, we have the environment, and we've got ourselves, the organism that's interacting with the environment and engaging in behaviors. And then we have our environment that we're in, and then we have all kinds of stimuli or energy changes in our environment. So maybe we have a bird humming, the sun shining, glaring in our eyes. Maybe we have the wind just started kicking up. All these different stimuli that are affecting us and causing us to interact with our environment. Or maybe a cloud starts raining, and so we engage in the behavior of getting an umbrella. Maybe the sun starts shining behind a cloud and gets in our eyes, so we grab some sunglasses. So we have all these different stimuli that are affecting us, and we're behaving and interacting within that physical environment. So a stimulus, like I mentioned, is an energy change that affects an organism through its receptor cells. So a lot of jargon, but again, stimuli are all around us. They're a part of our environment. They're affecting us through our receptor cells, and we'll talk about lots of different examples. But as I mentioned in the other example, it could be things like the sun shining in your face, a dog barking, a bird flying by, the wind just started picking up, somebody honked their horn, maybe you smell a food truck that just drove past. Again, there's so many stimuli that are constantly around us in our environment, and that's going to affect us through our receptor cells. We can often think about stimulus changes because they affect us through our receptor cells. We interpret what's occurring around us through our senses, and so we can think about stimulus changes through our senses. So we have vision, smell, taste, hearing, and touch. So some stimulus changes that could occur with our senses is vision. Like I mentioned, the sun starts shining and you need to grab your glasses. Maybe you see a dog growling down the street, and so you turn the other way. For smell, maybe you smell a food truck passing by, and so you grab your wallet because you're super hungry. Or maybe you smell, the brownies that you just put in, they're getting ready to be pulled out. Taste, maybe someone just sprayed hand sanitizer and it got in your mouth, and so you need to go get water. Maybe you just tried the dinner you just made and it was the best thing you've ever tasted. Hearing, maybe you hear the ice cream truck run by. Maybe you're hearing a dog, you don't see the dog, but you hear the dog on your walk, so you turn the other way. Maybe touch, we learned very early on that if you touch the hot stove, you're gonna pull your hand back, things like that. Or you stick your hand outside and it's really cold, so you know how to dress for the day. So again, all these stimulus changes, we can think about our senses and start to think about the plethora of stimulus changes that are going around us and how that is impacting our behavior. Here are some more examples of stimulus changes. So maybe a cop flashes his lights behind you, and all of a sudden you see the running blue lights behind you. And so again, you're interpreting the stimulus change through your vision, and then you can act accordingly. So you'll likely, pull over and things like that. Another example is maybe it's quiet and then all of a sudden a dog starts barking, and maybe this is in different context. Maybe you're in your house and you have a dog, so you let them out, or maybe you're on a walk and a dog starts barking, so you turn the other way. So again, it can affect your behavior in so many different ways. But again, it's that stimulus change, and in this sense, in this example, we're going to interpret it through our senses, specifically with hearing. And then another example is the sun's out and then it starts raining, and so maybe you're looking down, all of a sudden you start feeling raindrops on your skin, and so you know that you need to go grab an umbrella. So again, with this example, the raindrops, you're interpreting this through your receptor cells of touch, and you can feel it on your skin, and so then that's going to affect your behavior, and you're likely going to go get an umbrella. Now, take 2 minutes to create a list of 5 examples of stimulus change occurring in the natural environment. So take 2 minutes, think of all the different examples we've talked about so far. You could probably even just sit and look around you at all the stimulus changes that are occurring and create a list of 5 examples. Again, thinking about how we engage in behavior through interacting with our environment. It's just a constant, ongoing stream. Stimulus changes could be non-social events or socially mediated events that occur around us. So a non-social event could be something that does not require another person. So a dog barking, the sun rising, it starts raining, the wind starts picking up, it starts thundering. Those are all non-social events that can occur around us that don't require another person. Socially mediated stimulus changes require another person. So example, a friend asks you a question, a friend waves at you, someone honks at you, a baby starts crying. All those things require another person for that stimulus change. A stimulus class is any group of stimuli that share specified common elements along formal, temporal, and or functional dimensions. So some examples for these for a formal stimulus class could be things that are red. So maybe an apple, a barn, a flower, a strawberry. All of those things share the common element along a formal dimension of being red. Temporal stimulus class occur around a specific time of doing something. So, for example, it could be around the time of bedtime. So maybe things like the evening news, reading a bedtime story, dinner time, those are all a part of a stimulus class along the temporal dimension because they all surround the time of eating or the time of going to bed. A functional stimulus class could look something like, serving the function of getting someone to stop. So this could look like a raised hand in the stop sign position. We could look at a stop sign as a stimulus class, someone, yelling stop. All those look different, but they still serve the same function, and so they would be part of a functional stimulus class. So we have our contingency diagram, and we have our antecedent, our behavior, and our consequence. So what occurs before the behavior is our antecedent. What occurs after the behavior is our consequence. And both the antecedent and the consequence are stimulus changes in our environment. The antecedent specifically refers to environmental conditions or stimulus changes that exist or occur prior to the behavior of interest. So again, that stimulus that occurs before the behavior. For example, like I mentioned, a dog barks, so then you engage in either, maybe you're on a walk, you engage the behavior of turning around, or maybe you engage the behavior of letting your dog out, depending on the context. That's going to result in different behaviors. But again, it's that environmental conditions or stimulus changes that exist or occur prior to the behavior of interest. And then consequence is those stimulus changes that occur after the behavior. But antecedent is a stimulus change prior to the behavior of interest. A consequence, like I mentioned before, we have our antecedent, behavior, and consequences. Both the antecedent and consequence are stimulus changes, and the consequence is a stimulus change that follows a behavior of interest. Oftentimes, we think of consequence, before I was in the field of applied behavior analysis, we think of it in this negative context of like someone getting in trouble or something. Consequence, however, in this setting in applied behavior analysis, just refers to a stimulus change that follows a behavior of interest. So maybe that is you engage in the behavior of turning your AC on and all of a sudden cold air comes on. Things like that. So you're engaging at the behavior, a stimulus change occurs after. So again, antecedent is a stimulus change that occurs prior to the behavior of interest, like a dog barking and you let them out. And then a consequence is a stimulus change that follows the behavior of interest. So again, you turn on the AC and all of a sudden cool air kicks on and you can feel that cool air. So we like to think of behavior in a behavioral stream. Human behavior is so very complex. And again, like we talked about, we're engaging in behaviors in an environmental context, and we're constantly in an environmental context, so we're constantly engaging in behavior. And so these behaviors, the stimulus changes within our environment, the antecedents, the consequences of the behaviors, all are constantly affecting each other. And again, we like to refer to that as the behavioral stream. So it's all together, it's all affecting each other, it's in and out, there's so many things happening at once. They're all connected in a way because we're constantly going throughout the day, constantly in our environment, constantly responding to stimulus changes, or we're engaging behaviors that are followed by stimulus changes. So again, it is so complex and everything is just happening. It's an ongoing interaction. In order to understand behavior, we've talked about the purpose of applied behavior analysis is to improve human behavior. But how do we do that when everything is so complex? So we can't possibly look at a behavioral stream with so many things happening and understand what is going on. So we like to take one piece of the behavioral stream or a wave and analyze it. And in order to do that, we've already talked a little bit about this, but we're going to analyze it by viewing it through this contingency, and we're going to view it through the antecedent, which is the stimulus change before the behavior, so what that organism is engaging in, what they're doing, and then the consequence is the stimulus change that happens after. So we're going to piece apart this behavioral stream by pulling out a single wave, analyzing it through this method, and then start to understand the context, all while remembering that this really doesn't happen. There's no such thing as an isolated single wave. So we have to remember that even though we're analyzing the single wave, it's still part of a greater behavioral stream. Now let's do a 3-minute activity. So you'll record your own behavioral stream of your morning routine this morning in one big flow chart. So identify the antecedents, behaviors, and consequences that occur throughout. So we've talked all about this part of analyzing the single wave, and we've also talked about the behavioral stream. So now you're going to record your own behavioral stream of your morning routine, and just however you want to do it. It can be on a big piece of paper, it could be on your iPad, anything like that, and just record your morning routine. The antecedents that are occurring, those stimulus changes, the behaviors that you engaged in, the consequences or the stimulus changes that happened after you engaged the behaviors, and then continually throughout your whole morning routine, kind of map that out. So take 3 minutes to do this. So here's some examples I came up with. I couldn't really draw a huge flow chart on my slide, but for example, let's think about the antecedent of my alarm went off, then I engaged in the behavior of I hit snooze, then the consequence was I slept in and I missed the bus. So again, we can see just analyzing that single wave of my alarm went off, I hit snooze, and now I missed the bus. Another example is I walked into the kitchen, I saw some bread on the counter, so I put some toast in the toaster, and then it came out warm and was super delicious. So again, we can see that stimulus change. We're seeing that toast on the counter, we're engaging the behavior, putting it in the toaster, and then the consequence, that stimulus change after, and it's perfectly warm, we can melt the butter right on it, and it's a perfect little breakfast. So then another example is my dog barked. So I let him out to play, we went outside, I ended up getting some awesome dog snuggles before the workday and got some sunshine. So again, we have that antecedent, that stimulus change. We hear the dog bark, we engage in the behavior of letting them out to play. The consequence, we get a lot of dog snuggles and some fresh air before the workday. So again, this could go on as you record your behavioral stream just in your morning routine, let alone in your whole day. So this is some of the examples I came up with, and I'm sure you can look at the examples you came up with and start to see how we analyze that through looking at the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence. Let's do a quick another review. What is a stimulus change that occurs before a behavior? So we've really talked about antecedent, behavior, consequence. We've talked about a lot of concepts. So what is a stimulus change that occurs before a behavior? A, antecedent. B, consequence. C, stimulus class. Or D, repertoire. So take some time to think about that. If you need to pause the video and then replay it, you can, and we'll talk about the answer. The answer to this question is A, antecedent. So an antecedent is a stimulus change that occurs before a behavior, which means B, a consequence, would be a stimulus change that occurs after a behavior. We talked about stimulus classes that can be formal, temporal, or functional, things like a functional stimulus class of stimuli that signify to stop, or maybe a formal stimulus class of things that are red or green or things like that, things that are furry. That could be another formal stimulus class. A temporal stimulus class of things surrounding the time of waking up in the morning, so maybe a rooster crowing, breakfast, the morning news, things like that. And then we have repertoire, which is everything, all the behaviors that we can do that's in our repertoire, and that also can be within a context. So all the things we can do, but also all the things we can do within the context of life skills or communication skills. So again, antecedent is a stimulus change that occurs before a behavior. All right, think about the following situations. You are at the beach and a piece of sand flies into your eye. I know I can feel it right now, how that would feel. How does your body react? So think about this piece of sand flies right into your eye. How does your body react? The second example is you are in your bedroom with blackout curtains and you wake up and immediately walk outside to the bright sun. And how do you think your body's going to react? So again, you've got these super nice blackout curtains. You've slept in there all night. It's been super pitch black. You walk straight out into the sun. And how do you think your body will react? The last example is your sibling jumps out of the closet and scares you. You were in your room, say alone, you thought no one was in there, and you were just reading a good book, and they jump out and scare you. How do you think your body is going to react? So again, think about all three of these situations and think about what is your body going to do. You can take a minute, close your eyes, think about how your body would react. So a reflex is there's no learning required. And so if we think about all the situations we just talked about, something flies into your eye, you're going to start blinking. Or maybe someone scares you, your heart rate's going to increase. Or, maybe you walk out into the sun after being in blackout curtains and your eyes are going to squint. All these things are reflexes that we have never had to learn. We're just born with them. And they're part of our genetic endowment. So they protect, regulate, and promote reproduction. So we think about the sand in our eye, our body is immediately doing that. We've never been taught that. We've never been taught to all of a sudden blink or squint or things like that. But our body does that as a way to protect ourselves. And it's something that we're just born with. So these are built-in responses that our body engages in to help protect, regulate, and promote reproduction. Respondent behavior is behavior that has a stimulus-response relationship. So it is behavior that is elicited by an antecedent stimulus. So we have things like bright light, you're going to squint your eyes. So we have that bright light, which is that stimulus change, and immediately followed by that response. So that bright light elicits that behavior. So that blinking or squinting is elicited by the antecedent stimuli of a bright light. Or someone jumps out to scare you, your heart rate is going to increase. So again, you have the antecedent stimuli of someone jumps out to scare you, and then you have that behavior is elicited by that event, which is going to be your heart rate increasing. Or maybe you got a piece of sand in your eye and you're blinking. So we have the antecedent stimuli, the piece of sand in your eye. Blinking is that behavior that's elicited by that antecedent stimuli. So again, we have it's that SR relationship. Stimulus, then the response. Habituation is when there's a repeated stimulus in a short time frame, and that is going to diminish response strength. So say at first we have the bright light, we're in our room all night with blackout curtains, we step outside and then we squint a ton and we can barely see and we're stumbling over ourselves, and then say that bright light keeps being repeated in that short time frame. Eventually we're going to stop squinting or stop blinking because that's going to diminish the response strength. So again, habituation is when that repeated stimulus is repeated in a short amount of time frame, and that is going to result in the diminishing response strength. So, for example, we can think of another example is if someone jumps out and scares you, your heart rate's going to increase. But if they keep doing that, eventually that's going to diminish the response strength. Your heart rate's going to go back to normal. It's not even really going to affect you anymore if they jump out again. So again, habituation, we're going to repeat that stimulus in a short amount of time frame, and it's going to diminish the response strength. Now we're going to talk about respondent conditioning. So we know that we have these reflexes, and we often hear about respondent conditioning in the context of Pavlov's dog. So let's kind of break this down and we'll kind of explain what's happening. So with Pavlov's dog, we have this dog food bowl, right? They smell the dog food and they're going to immediately start salivating. This is a reflex because they've never had to learn to start salivating. They just know from birth, when they smell food, they're going to start salivating. So we know every time dog food gets brought in the room, that dog's going to start salivating. And then that's going to be our unconditioned stimulus. So it's going to be something that the dog has never had to learn, but that stimulus is going to result in the dog salivating. And then we have a bell ringing, which for this dog is a neutral stimulus. It has no learning history. It's just there. So if they hear it, there's not going to be any salivating. They're just going to keep on with their day. So for respondent conditioning, we're going to use stimulus pairing. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have that neutral stimulus and that unconditioned stimulus. So we know the unconditioned stimulus is going to result in the dog salivating. The neutral stimulus right now is not going to because it has no learning history. It's not paired with dog food, but we're going to pair them together. So now what we're going to do, every time we walk in the room, we've got that dog food. Dog's going to salivate. We're also going to ring that bell while we present that. So we're pairing these two stimuli in order before eventually that neutral stimulus is going to become conditioned and then result in salivating, even without the dog food. So again, we're going to ring that bell every time dog food comes out. We're pairing the neutral stimulus, which is the bell ringing, with the unconditioned stimulus, which is the dog food. So dog food, we know, is a stimulus. It results in salivating because it's a reflex. The dogs were born with that ability. They've never had to learn. There's no learning history. That's just how it is, right? So now we've paired dog food with the bell ringing, and so now we just have to ring that bell and the dog's going to start salivating. And this is a conditioned reflex because the ringing bell has become a conditioned stimulus. And so we don't even have to bring the dog food in. If we start ringing that bell, we are going to see the dog salivate. So again, before that bell was a neutral stimulus, now it's a conditioned stimulus. And that dog salivating in response to the bell ringing, that is a conditioned reflex. Whereas the dog salivating in response to the dog food, that's just a reflex. They're born with that ability. It's, part of their genetic endowment. They can do it, from birth. They know just innately that they're gonna salivate when they smell dog food. But now we've paired that neutral stimulus with the unconditioned stimulus. We've paired the bell with the food, and now the bell becomes a conditioned stimulus, resulting in a conditioned reflex. Neutral stimulus can acquire the ability to elicit responses through a learning process called respondent conditioning. Again, we just talked about how this happens with Pavlov's dog example. So that neutral stimulus, the bell, can acquire the ability to elicit responses because we paired that with the unconditioned stimulus. So that bell was a neutral stimulus, and now it's a conditioned stimulus because we paired it with the unconditioned stimulus. So now when we ring that bell, that dog is going to salivate. So again, this is a learning process called respondent conditioning. Now let's do a 3-minute activity. So come up with 5 different examples of respondent behaviors in your own life. So again, we gave a lot of those other examples of respondent behaviors. Now it's time to think through your day, think through the different behaviors that you engage in, and come up with a list of 5 different examples of respondent behaviors that you engage in your own life. Here are some examples I came up with. So again, we have our startle response to thunder. So again, think about respondent behaviors. We have that stimulus and then the response. So we have that thunder, and then we're going to startle, and maybe our heart rate increases. And that happens with loud noises. Again, if you have a lot of noise, you look at a baby, if there's loud noise happening, they'll likely cry, things like that. So we're born with that behavior, that reflex, that when something loud happens like thunder, we're going to startle, our heart rate's going to increase. Or maybe we're in a movie for 3 hours, it's super dark in there, we were super cozy, then we walk out of the movie theater and we start to squint because it's so bright outside. That's another example of a respondent behavior. Again, we have that stimulus, the bright, all of a sudden it's bright, it was dark, it's now bright, we have that stimulus change, and then we're going to engage in that respondent behavior or our reflex of squinting. Lastly, another example is salivate when you walk into a bakery. So maybe we walk into a bakery, that stimulus change, all of a sudden we smell the best banana bread ever, or whatever your favorite treat is, you're going to start to salivate. So again, we have that stimulus, and then we have that response, which is our reflex or respondent behaviors. So hopefully you came up with your own examples, and you can see through your own examples the stimulus and then the response.